and we'll get started. All right, so welcome everyone today to today's session. I'll have to make it probably a bit shorter than usual. It's probably about 50 minutes or so. A lot of meetings going on today at the same time, so I'm just trying to make sure that I'm not kind of overstretching myself here. So let's without further ado, let's go and start talking about RESP. So family, individual, or group. Which ones are right for you? Are any of them really right for you? Is the real question. And when should you be considering to get one? So we'll talk about all of that right now. Okay, so what are some of the key features of a RESP? So first of all, what does RESP stand for? It's a Registered Education Savings Plan, and it's available to Canadian residents. So basically, it's an account that allows you to save for a child's education. It doesn't have to be your own personal child. For some of them, for some, it has to be your child. So for instance, you can open an individual RESP in any child's name. So if you have a nephew or a niece, or maybe a family friend that just had a child and you want to contribute to that child's education in the long term, you can literally open an account in their name. The two things that are absolutely necessary and required is that the child be a Canadian resident, and I'll in the description below, just in the video description below, you can actually see a link to the subsection of the CRA website that describes what is a Canadian resident for tax purposes. Again, this doesn't deal with specifically are you a Canadian permanent resident or are you a Canadian citizen. It really deals with the issue of are you a resident of Canada? Do you reside as your primary residence in a province or territory of Canada? Right? And in some situations, you might be away from the country and still be considered, and not actually reside in Canada, but yet still be considered a Canadian resident. So you might think it's a very simple description in terms of what is a resident and what isn't, but it really you can go through those that link, which I'll pop up here in a second, and kind of read the fine print. So just look in the description. For most people, it's pretty straightforward. For some, depending on your status, etc., it might be a bit more complicated. Anyway, so the child has to be a resident, and then the child also have to have a social insurance number, Canadian social insurance number. As long as you know the child's name, date of birth, and then just some basic information about themselves, including their social insurance number, you can open an account in their name. Now, it's less frequent that a family friend or an extended family member will open an RESP in someone else's child's name. But again, it's not impossible to do so. You could do so if you're asking the parents. Typically, it's usually advised to simply give the money to the parents and just have them contribute that money to their own child's RESP. Again, unless you're worried that the parents won't necessarily be using that money for the purposes you intend to. So long story short, it's basically a type of account that enables children that are under the age of 18 to go to post-secondary, to follow post-secondary education, whether it's some form of trade or, doing a master's, PhD, what have you, in whatever field that they want. And we'll talk about which universities, which programs are eligible. And there's actually a very, very large number of universities globally, not just in Canada, for which you can actually use these the investment / savings that the child will have accumulated in that account. All right, so the very important thing to understand. In many ways, an RESP, it's also a registered account, the same way that the TFSA is a registered account. An RRSP, a registered retirement savings plan, is also a registered account. So they're registered accounts with the federal government. In some provinces, you will also get certain provincial benefits. So Saskatchewan and Quebec are two of the provinces that kind of get the most additional benefits on top of this. Other Canadian provinces don't give any additional ones. Anyway, we'll talk about that in a second. But basically, the contribution, so whatever you're contributing, whether you're a family friend or whether you are the parent, the contributions are not tax deductible. So you cannot say, well, I've contributed, I don't know, $1,000 this year in I don't know, in little Timmy's RESP. Therefore, please give me back, the taxes I paid on that $1,000. So unlike the RRSP, it's not tax deductible, right? But like the RRSP, it is a registered account. In other words, the Canadian government keeps track of how much money has been contributed to every single RESP that has been opened in a child's name. So in that regard, it's a bit more closely related, I guess, to the TFSA in a sense of contributions are not tax deductible, all right? But again, you're opening it in the child's name. So the child becomes something that is known as the beneficiary. All right. So as I was saying before, it's subject to the residency status of said child. And this is, again, the subsection of the CRA website that talks about determining someone's residential status. If you've been here for some of my previous sessions on taxes or attended some of my sessions on McGill, Concordia, etc., you are already fairly aware of this, okay? So that's an important thing to keep in mind. Now, to open, the beneficiary has to be under 18 years of age. And as I said before, it also has to have a valid social insurance number to figure out exactly, who can subscribe, etc. You have a bit more information here on this section. Again, that's your second link in the video description. All right. Now, the investments are really cool. So you might be thinking, well, what's the point of helping, or why should I be saving for my child or for someone else's child in an RESP instead of just standard regular investment account? Well, the cool thing about it, because again, it's a registered account, you don't pay any taxes. The person who is investing on the behalf of this child, which is the beneficiary of the account, is not paying any taxes, and the account itself doesn't pay any taxes whatsoever on any of the gains as long as the money stays inside of the plan. So as long as the money stays inside of the RESP, you can buy and sell various investments or all eligible investments without having to pay a single penny in taxes. So that's very, very nice, because again, your investments can legally grow significantly more so than they would otherwise if they were outside of a registered account, because then you would have to be paying taxes on them. Now, just because you're not paying any taxes, so again, it's tax-free. So just because you're not paying any taxes doesn't mean that every single RESP out there is created equal. So what you want to do is you want to find an RESP that has the types of investments that you're comfortable investing in. So whether you want to go simply with mutual funds or whether you want to go with index ETFs, for example, or what have you, you want to make sure that whatever supply or whatever provider you're opening an account with is registered to provide those services to you. And obviously you want to invest in line with your investment goals. So if you're someone who tolerates relatively low risk, you want to go with a relatively low risk investment, right? So same thing here. Don't because various providers will offer various options for investing for RESPs. And same thing, if you're looking at a specific investment that matches the time horizon, that matches your risk tolerance and the risk tolerance you're willing to invest the money for this child's education, well, at that point, you want to also minimize fees as much as possible. Keep in mind, as I told you already, there's zero tax to be paid as long as the money stays inside of the RESP. Once the money is taken out of the RESP, depending on the reason for which it's taken out of the RESP, certain fees have to be paid. If you're taking out the money, if the money is taken out of the RESP without being used in a context such as a post-secondary education context, if it's just taken out because the child, once they turn 18 and the money becomes legally theirs, they just feel like going on a world tour and and taking a year off to find themselves, they're allowed to do that. The money, again, once they turn 18, becomes legally theirs. but that money will be taxed fully at their rate, at their whatever their income rate is. And on top of that, the government bonds and grants, which we'll talk about very shortly, have to be paid back to the government. There's no extra penalties on top of that typically, unless you're dealing with group RESPs, and we'll see some of the negative consequences of opening up a group RESP. But so yeah, so as long as the money stays, and as long as the investments stay inside of the plan itself, there's zero tax to be paid on an ongoing basis. Once money starts being taken out, then it becomes taxable in the child's hands. If the money is being used for post-secondary education, whether that's a trade school in Canada, internationally, or university, whether it's bachelor's, master's, PhD, etc. Degree. At that point, if it's actually used for the purpose for post-secondary education purposes, then you don't have to pay back the government grants anymore, but it still becomes taxable in the child's hand. Now, that being said, there's a good chance that your child will be in a significantly lower tax bracket than you currently are. So despite the fact that, yes, you're not getting any form of tax deductions for contributing to your child's RESP, for instance, nonetheless, that money will be able to grow a lot more efficiently in that account than it would otherwise be able to if you were just keeping the money in a separate non-registered account. All right. So RESPs can actually stay open in most cases for about 36 years, or roughly until the child turns 36. If your child or the child for which the RESP is open, so if the beneficiary of the RESP has some form of mental or physical disability, in those cases it can typically remain open for up to 40 years. All right. Or up to when they turn 40, because obviously if you max out the RESP when they're 17 only, or when they're, let's say, 16, you just contribute all of the money to it at that point in time. You cannot keep it open for 36 years from that point in time. It's literally until the child is 36 or 40 again in some cases. So your third link, I'll go back to it afterwards, and this is a kind of a really good resource website by the Ontario Securities Commission that I like to go back to time and again. This is a kind of a really nice summary of a lot of the things that I'm talking about today. So kind of if you want to see a summary of kind of the main highlights that I'm covering, and again, I'm adding a bit of extra information here as well, but if you want to see a nice summary, literally just you can read this afterwards. All right, but a lot of this stuff I'm covering over next about 40 minutes or so, and I'm adding a bit extra information. So very, very useful. So that's the third link in the description of this video. Okay. All right. So now the last point on this slide here is, so I mentioned to you that there's this full list of eligible institutions. So that's your fourth link. So notice how they have this list by province. So obviously you can go by province. So if you're from Quebec and you want to, your child wants to stay within Quebec, this is a list of basically all the institutions. And notice, right, you have about 10 or so institutions here, right, 1 to 10, but there's actually 111 different ones. There you go, available in Quebec. So all these CEGEPs, also you see the technical college here, TAV college. So those are kind of, slightly less standard ones. So there you go, Aviron as well. So a lot of these are technical colleges. Obviously, the universities are there. You have University of Sherbrooke, McGill, Concordia, HEC, etc., etc., etc. Right now, so it's not just Quebec though, right? So those of you that are from Quebec, you're not stuck in the province, right? You're allowed to go. Your children are allowed to go in any other province that they want, and you can basically see, let's just go to Nova Scotia here. You have 60 different options in Nova Scotia, and basically here's the full list of them. But you notice the very last tab here is international. So again, I don't want you to think that, oh my God, well, this is a great, this is great because the money grows tax-free. Plus, there's all these additional incentives that the government provides. But the downside being obviously that, well, my child is stuck going to Canada. What if they want to go to the US, or they want to go maybe somewhere in Asia? Maybe they want to go for their studies in Europe, etc., etc. Well, yes, you can go in many, many places. Not every single small, unknown program is going to be available, but if you're clicking on international, you notice I clicked on international, there's literally 2,661 different options available currently. And more and more options have been added to this list over time. Now, obviously, a lot of them will be in the US, but it's not only in the US. So you see, for example, here, and you'll have obviously the large universities, but also much, much smaller colleges, and also, again, also more practical or sort of skills or trade-based options as well. All right. So let's just randomly scroll down. So yes, as I said, there's a lot of options in the US that are part of this, but not only in the States. Let's actually go by, did I have a, okay. So if I'm trying to see if there's an option to segregate. So obviously UK, there's a whole bunch of options in the UK. Germany, Sweden, University of Skövde, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing this, I probably am. ESA business school, for example. Again, the large universities globally, there's a good chance that a lot of them will be on this list. But if you want to make sure, just make sure to double check and tell your child that they have a choice between 2,661 different global universities on top of all the other Canadian universities / trade schools / colleges, on top of all the other options in Canada. So things in Croatia, I just saw up there, Ireland, Spain, Finland, Poland, France, Norway, Hungary, Germany, etc., etc., etc. And I'm fairly certain there were quite a few, Switzerland here, Czech Republic. So quite a few options in Europe, but you also have other things, kind of more in the Middle East or in Asia. For example, you have Lebanon, Jordan here, Turkey, Iran, Qatar, Cyprus. Again, that's not Asia, but you get what I'm saying. Israel, Cairo, and so on and so forth. So the point being, it's really, really good. In Pakistan here, Malaysia, and so on and so forth. China, there's quite a few options in China as well, right? So it's a very good program that can be used for education in many places around the world. Again, I don't want to say in every single school out there, but there are definitely a lot of options to choose from. So that should be more than enough options for your average for your average individual. Okay. All right. So what are some of the additional key features that I kind of alluded to before? So I mentioned to you before that there are certain government bonds, and we'll talk about those as well as grants you're getting. There's also very important to keep in mind, there's a lifetime contribution limit of $50,000 per child, right? So you're allowed to contribute up to $50,000 per child, okay? And that's it. You're not allowed to contribute more than that. There's no cap how much those $50,000 can grow to, right? So you start investing early enough, you make your contributions. There's no limit. So $50,000 is not the limit to how much the money can grow to. It's just $50,000 is the amount of money that you're allowed to contribute per child. If you have 2 children and you open a family RESP, well, guess what? The limit for that entire family is $100,000, $50,000 per child, etc. You can also open, again, multiple RESPs. You can do it yourself. If it's a family RESP, it has to be someone who is related to the child. So it's a parent, either adoptive or biological. For the family one, it literally has to be one of the parents, whether they're biological or adoptive. For an individual one, it could be some more distant family members, as long as they have the child's information and or family friend. Again, typically it's recommended just pool all the money in one place. It's easier to keep track of it. And you can open as many RESPs as you want, but a $50,000 per child limit, that is cumulative. So just opening 3 different RESPs doesn't give you access to $150,000, okay? So it's still $50,000. You can, if you want, so let's say, you have 1, 2, and 3 RESPs here. So let's say the first one is a family RESP. Family. This one is a standard individual, and then this is not an individual one, right? So the last two, the individual ones, anyone can open them for your child, right? Maybe it was you, maybe it was somebody else, as long as you, again, they have the information of the child. And the thing is, again, if this person contributes $500, again, none of these have a limit in terms of how much the money can grow to, but there's a limit of how much you are allowed to contribute. The second one can be 2,000, and then that means that this one, the one you're contributing to at this point, because already $2,000 has been contributed to this one, maybe, I don't know, the grandparents have contributed $2,000 over the last 10 years or something like that, $200 a year as a birthday gift or something like that, I don't know. Same thing here, maybe a friend of yours just gave your child a $500 one-time thing, or continuously contributed to this. So what this does is that it lowers the lifetime contribution limit of this third one to basically 50,000 minus these ones combined, right? So you would have 47,500, right? So that's all it does, and same idea. So it's simply cumulative. Whichever one you add to, it reduces the contribution limit to the other ones. Okay. If you over contribute, much like with the TFSA and RRSP, there's typically a penalty that the government will charge you. So don't over contribute is the key takeaway there. And yeah, so the federal government will give you access to various grants, and then if you're below or within certain household income levels, you will also get access to additional bonds. All right, so the bonds are basically literally kind of little boosters for lower or income individuals, or medium to lower income individuals, and the grants are there for pretty much anyone. Okay. So what can you get? There's the Canada Education Savings Grant. So this is, as I said, this is pretty much open to any Canadian, as long as and any Canadian resident, I should say, as long as the child has a valid social insurance number and is featured as a Canadian, or is considered a Canadian resident. Okay, so they are able to get up to $7,200 in the Canada Education Savings Grant. The way this grant is calculated, as I will show you on the next couple of slides, but just so you know, I don't want to keep you in suspense for too long here. The way this one is calculated is on the first $2,500 per year that you contribute. Okay, you get 20% matching by the federal government, regardless of your income level. All right, you're earning $1 million. Your first $2,500 you contribute to your child's RESP. You get 20% matching by the federal government, which means you literally get a grant of $500, right? And again, this grant gets added on top of the $50,000 total amount, right? So basically, this total amount this is how much you're allowed to contribute, $50,000. The government on top of this will give you another $7,200 minimum. Okay, if you're lower income, you can have access up to an additional $2,000 in the Canada Learning Bond, which will be paid out in various or in different amounts. And again, I'll show you that on the next slide, exactly the breakdown. It's roughly, if you're making between about 46 and about 90 something thousand, you're getting about 10%. And if you're making less than $46,000, again, this is household income, not personal income, then you're going to get an additional 20% matching. And again, I'll show you exactly how this works on the very next slide. Okay, so this is for lower income families. If you're making above 90 something thousand, again, that's always adjusted for inflation. I don't remember off the top of my head the exact number, but I'll show it to you on the next slide. At that point, you don't get any of this one. Okay, so this $2,000 is on top of the $7,200, and the idea there is lower income families have a harder time saving, have a harder time making ends meet, especially when there's a global pandemic going on. So because of that, the government wants to encourage people to save for their child's education. Okay, so that's basically what that is for. Okay. There's also various other smaller incentives, which I'll talk about. For instance, when you're opening your very first RESP, provided whatever your income level is, you're typically given a $25 amount to cover any opening fees, depending on which financial institution you open the account with. Sometimes there's a $25 or thereabout processing fee, and basically the government will tell you, well, here's an additional basically $25 to just cover you opening the account, right? If your financial institution doesn't charge you a $25 opening fee, the government still gives you that $25 because they want to be fair to everyone else. So if you've done your research, you found a financial institution that provides the services that you want, and that doesn't charge you a $25 to open the account, well, guess what? The Canadian government will still give you $25. Now, this is not not a massive fortune or anything, but hey, it's free $25. I'll gladly take a free $25 off anyone's hands if they don't want it themselves, right? So why not, right? So that's that. Also, again, if you're lower income, I'll show you on the next slide exactly what the numbers are. You will also get a one-time $500 kind of booster, if you will, just to open the account. Just to open the account, literally the very first time that you want to open the account, the government says you don't need a single penny of your own. We want you to save for your child's education. We value an educated population. All you have to do is literally just go do a bit of research to find a provider that offers the products that you're happy with, and then literally just give them basically 25. Just fill out the forms, and then the provider will send those forms to the government, and the government will literally give you $25 for the opening fee if there is one, and if there isn't one, you just get $25. And on top of that, they'll also deposit $500 in the child's account without you contributing a single penny. Okay, but again, this is really only for lower income individuals. This $500 here. Okay, but again, it's a nice and that's there. And yes, and there are three types of RESPs, as you've seen in the title of today's session. So there's individual, family, and group. Now you can convert an individual RESP into a family one pretty much whenever you want, okay? Provided you are a parent, again, either adoptive or biological parent of that child, of that beneficiary of the RESP. If you're a more extended family member or a family friend or just a random person that wants to gift some money to a child for their education, you're not allowed to convert that individual RESP into a family one. So the way that an individual, again, from the word here, you will figure it out. An individual RESP is designed for an individual beneficiary, so for one single child. If the family has 5 children, that one RESP is designated specifically for one child, that you have to mention at the onset who the beneficiary is, basically, and that's the child for whom those funds are earmarked for, right? A family one, again, can be for all of the children of that family that are, again, through adoption and or combined biological, okay? So the nice thing about a family versus an individual account is that the family account, let's say you have 3 children. Child number 2 becomes a rock star or a YouTube phenomenon or whatever, and they're making a ton of money, and they don't need to go to they don't need to go to post-secondary. They don't need to have a post-secondary education to be successful and do fine in life, right? So at that point in time, the family option allows you to shift a part, if you so choose, of the funds that have been initially, contributed in that child's name to one of your other children, or equally split it among the other children if you have more than 2 of them, without having to repay the government grants. If you're opening, let's say you have 2 children and you open 2 individual RESPs and you're not combining them into one, the individual RESP, again, at this point your child turns 18 and they decide for whatever reason that they don't want to pursue or they can't pursue a post-secondary education, whether it's a trade or anything else. At that point in time, the money is still theirs. It becomes taxable in their own hands, right? But both the grants and, again, if you were low income while the money has been contributed to this, the bonds will also have to be paid back to the government, right? So if you want to avoid having to pay the money back to the government, in many cases, a family one is a bit more flexible because it does offer the option, if you so choose, to shift some of the money from from one child to another, or or let's say one child goes to pursues some degree in the U.S., which is a lot more expensive than your other child that might stay in province, for instance, and as a result will pay a fraction of the cost. Now, again, it's up to you. It's your choice as a parent to decide whether, it's my child's choice. If they want to go to a more expensive university, it's on them to pay the difference. Or it's so basically you want to keep it. Let's say you have two children, and it doesn't matter. It's a family one. So, but let's say you max it out to 50,000 per child, and this combined $100,000. Let's say it grew to 250,000, right? So you could just keep it at 125 and 125 per child, or if it makes more sense and you want to do so, shift some of it to the other child. Again, it's really up to you. And the conversation will have to with your children at that point in time. So whether you want to keep it equal or shift it around, it's fine. So the nice thing about the family one is, again, it does provide you with more options. Typically, whenever you're dealing with investments, the lower the fees and the more options you have, the better that particular account or that particular investment is. Okay? So individual and family are very similar in terms of what are the options that you have, with the difference that you can convert an individual account into a family account whenever you want. Typically, there might be a small processing fee, maybe $25 or $50. Sometimes there's no processing fee whatsoever. Depending, again, read the fine print when you sign up with your financial institution that provides you with the RESP for your children or child. And then the family one offers you this flexibility. Now, the group one stands apart. Okay, the group one, by many measures, is by far less flexible, has much higher fees typically, and overall is probably your least preferred option. And I'll show you specific examples at the very end today. Okay, so what are some of those government contributions I was talking about here? Let's look at it in a bit more detail, right? So, all very, very important. All RESP types give you access to the exact same government grants / bonds if you're lower income. Incredibly important to understand this. The reason I'm saying this is because certain, shall we say, sub-ethical individuals that advertise typically a certain type of RESP. I'm not going to name which ones it is, but I think it becomes very obvious if you look at the screen. Sometimes we'll have their sales pitch will be, yes, our fees are high, but look at all the government grants we give you access to. You don't have to do anything. All you have to do is just transfer money to the account and we take care of everything. Well, guess what? So do the other two RESPs. It's not a feature of the group ones alone, right? Every single subtype of RESP gives you access to the exact same government grants and bonds. The only limits that you have is what province you live in and what income level your household is in. The lower your income level, the more money you will get in terms of the bonds, because you're not going to have access to all of the bonds or any of the bonds if your household income level is high enough. That has nothing to do with the type of RESP. And secondly, certain provinces, such as Saskatchewan and Quebec, offer substantial more additional incentives on a provincial level. Other provinces don't offer any provincial incentives whatsoever. Okay, so again, it's not a feature of the group versus non-group. It's literally dependent on what province do you live in and what is your income level. I'm not trying to say that every single group RESP salesperson out there will kind of try to make the case for this, or will have that spin on it. But unfortunately, I've heard far too many stories and I've seen far too many examples of instances where some of those salespeople will try to kind of put that angle, which is, again, it's a blatant misrepresentation of group versus individual versus family. All RESPs offer the exact same grants, offer the exact same bonds, provided on what province you live in and provided on what your family income level is. Again, I know I repeated that 3 times over, but I wanted to be very, very clear. That's not a misstatement on my part. That's the way it is. So there's absolutely no advantage of opening one account type versus another in terms of which one gives you more money. All of them will give you the same amount. If you want to get more money, have a lower income or move provinces, right? But typically just having a lower income just to get a few extra $100 per year from the government is not a very viable strategy long term. So I probably would not advise that. So the Canada Education Savings Grant, if you want to learn more about it, I think I forgot to actually include the link to this one. I'll include it at the end of this session. I'll add any extra links that because I think there's about 2 or 3 links that I didn't include. So you have extra information here. The reason I like to provide you with these additional links here is just so you see that, what I'm telling you is not just me making up numbers, right? Because sometimes it might seem very weird that one of these accounts might be that much worse than another. I want to make it very clear that the numbers I'm showing you are literally from the from the CRA, from Revenu Quebec. They're the official numbers. This is basically how this works. Okay, so you can read everything that I'm about to tell you, or like that I've already told you here, on the official government of Canada website here. Okay. So you can see here, a child is eligible for additional amount of CSG, so Canada Education Savings Grant, if the adjusted family income level is, but again, this is from 2018, so if you're adjusting it for 2019, I think it's around $94,000 or thereabouts. As I said, it's adjusted every single year for inflation, and they haven't updated it on this section of their website, which is kind of silly because that's literally the section of the CRA website that deals with this. But yeah, I've seen the number elsewhere that's around $94,000 on the CRA website. Okay. So here you go, and there's a few additional restrictions, if you will, or special considerations when the child is 16 or 17, because again, you're no longer allowed to contribute to an RESP once the child is an adult. So once they turn 18, they're allowed to start taking money out of it for post-secondary education, but they're no longer able to contribute to it, or you're no longer able to contribute to it as a parent. So for children who are 16 or 17, may be eligible to get the CSG. Now, to be eligible, they must meet at least one of the following conditions before the end of the year. That they turn 15, because typically once the child turns 15, you're no longer eligible for the CSG, but you can still contribute to the RESP by the last day of their 17th year, right? But there are these 2 exceptions when you can your child might still be eligible to get the CSG. Is that before the end of the calendar year they turn 15, at least $2,000 contributed and not withdrawn from the RESP. So you have to have at least $2,000 inside of that RESP before they turn 15, and a minimum annual contribution of $100 is made to and not withdrawn from the RESP in any of the 4 previous years. So make sure that from the age of 11 to 15 or 12 to 15 inclusive, you contribute at least $100, and that combined you've contributed at least $2,000 by the time they turn 16. That way, once they turn 16, you can still continue contributing and still be eligible for the CSG. Otherwise, you won't. Now, the reason the government has this in place, again, this is speculation on my part, but it's probably because they want to avoid people trying to kind of max out the RESP just a year or 2 before the deadline, just to get the government grant, paid out. So there you go. So that way they kind of want to encourage people to be saving on a gradual basis for their children. Okay. And then, yeah, you can read more about exactly what every person gets and so on and so forth over here. And I'll show you kind of a summarized version of this on this slide here. Okay. So they typically qualify until they're 17, provided those 2 specifics. I already mentioned the grant limit is $7,200. The basic accumulates as follows. So the first $2,500, right? For the first $2,500, regardless of income, you're getting 20%, right? Which translates to $500 per year. Okay. Unused grant contribution carries forward until the child turns 17. Okay, so that's important thing to mention. Now you can also get an extra CSG based on low or lower family income. specifically if your income is below 46,605. Again, these are the numbers for 2018, 2019. They're a little higher. They're around 47-ish, 46,900 or thereabouts. You get an extra 20% on the first $500, okay, contributed. So 20%, that's basically an extra $100 per year. Family, and this is still federal, okay? So everyone gets this one. Now, if you're making less than 46,605 as a household, on the first 500, not the first 2,005, you get an extra 20%, which is an extra $100. If your family household is between 46 and 93, then you get another $50. Again, it's not a huge amount, but you know what? Any amount is a good amount, right? If your family income happens to, or your household income happens to be there, why not take advantage of that, right? This is basically how the breakdown works. Again, all of this is federal. I haven't touched the provincial stuff yet, okay? So less than 46,607, 605, sorry, you get basic $500 plus 20% on the first 500, which is another 100, equals $600 per year. Okay, between 46,605 and 93,208, you get an extra $50. So the basic 500 everyone gets, an extra $50, $550 basically per year. Once you make your family income is above, again, 93, roughly 94,000 now, or if you're looking at 2019 numbers, you're no longer getting this additional amount, but you're still getting the $500 a year on the first $2,500 contributed, which is again 20% of the contribution. So that's pretty straightforward, I'd say. Now, Canada Learning Bond, this is again for lower income families. So this is on top of what I just mentioned there. Okay, so this is here, the Canada Learning Bond. And if you want to see the link here, I'll just post it up in the chat, because I think that this one I also forgot to include in the description. I'll put it afterwards in the description itself. So here's the link in the chat. So again, it gives you a bit more information on this. And as I was saying, so if you're eligible for this one, you get $500 for the first year of eligibility, right? And then an additional $100 for each subsequent year, for a total of $2,000. So the way that actually gets broken down once you start actually looking at it. So again, if your income is below 46,000, child must be born after January 1st, 2004. I believe, actually, sorry, that might be 2005. Because again, I was using the numbers from their website, but technically speaking, their website hasn't been updated since 2018. So it probably is 2005 now that I think about it here. Right. Your child must receive the national child benefit under the child. So just make sure you're getting the CCB, you're getting the national benefit on top of the standard CCB, which again you should be if your family income is below 46,605. This also gives you access to up to additional, again, the $2,000 that I mentioned, and you don't need to make any of those contributions to qualify. And so this is what I was saying on my previous slide, where you qualify for this $500 at birth plus the $25 to cover your RESP admin fees, if there is one, and if not, you just get another $25 in your account basically. And then you can get an additional $100 per year until your child turns 15. So for a nice total of $1,500 plus the $500 initially. So that's a total of an additional $2,000 plus the $25. Compared to people that are in a higher income bracket, basically earning above 46,605 as a household, right? Now, Quebec actually has, and I'll focus here on Quebec just because most of you are probably from Concordia or McGill, or friends thereof, and you're probably in Montreal. So Quebec, for once, actually has one of the most, I would say, generous packages here, where they actually apply quite a bit of extra support. So sorry, I should have removed this. So there's the Quebec Education Incentive. That's the KSC here. And let me just copy this. Same thing. I'll copy this in the chat. And yeah, if you have any questions, just feel free to ask me in the chat, by the way. or if you post it after this the live stream is done, just post it in comments, and I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as possible. All right, so there you go. So specifically, what does Quebec give you? So you get an additional 10% on the first 2,500. So that's basically an additional $250. And now this one is very interesting, because in order to get it, you have to be a Canadian resident, a Quebec resident on December 31st of the preceding year. Okay? Year. So in other words, let's say your child is born in 2020. This year you contribute $2,500, right? So this, like right now we're in 2020. You contribute $2,500 right away, and let's assume you're in the higher income bracket, so you're above $94,000. So the only thing you're eligible for federally is just the $500, right? So you might say, hold on, but you said Quebec owes me $250. And I haven't received that money yet. Yeah, you haven't received it yet, because literally for them to send it out, in the year that you contribute, on December 31st of that year, so in 2020, by December 31st of 2020, you have to still be a resident of Quebec. If you're moving out of the province before December 31st of that year, you're no longer eligible to receive that money for December 31st of that year. Typically, it'll take them a few months in the subsequent year to contribute $250 into your child's account. Okay, so that's a thing to keep in mind. Okay, so they will give you the 10%, but it'll be roughly with half a year delay, depending on how early or late in the year you contribute. If you contribute on January 1st or the first few weeks of 2020, you literally have to wait until the first few weeks of 2021, so about a year later, to get the 250 from Quebec. Okay, because again, residency status in Quebec is assessed on December 31st. And so you have to wait until December 31st of the year you make the contribution in for them to say, oh, okay, here's an additional 10% of your contribution. For low-income families, that's an additional $50 per year, basically. Okay, their cutoff is around $44,000 or $45,000 thereabouts again. But yeah, so you can just click on this link, or on the link that I've copied in the chat, and see all the details about what the cutoffs are. Now, the lifetime grant limit, the lifetime amount that the Quebec government is going to give you, is $3,600, which kind of makes sense because they're giving you 10% here, and this, which is half of the 20, and this is $3,600, and while the federal government was giving you $7,200. So it's on the same amount really, but they're just giving you their respective or rough amounts. All right, so before I go to the wrap up, I wanted to spend a couple of minutes on explaining the difference between how group and talking about how good or bad group RESPs actually are. Let me very quickly check here. Do they still have it? Because I meant to add this. So there's the Quebec, and so Quebec and Saskatchewan are really the only two provinces that have these additional grants. Everywhere else you're just getting the federal parts. I think this still works. Yes. All right. The reason I'm showing you this is I used to, when I was giving this in classes, I used to give this and show specific examples. The reason I want to show it to you this way is because this is not just me picking on one company. Because you might think, well, Alex, you just picked the worst possible group company, and it's just them that do this. And yes, sure, there are some better and some worse group RESPs out there. But they're really, really not great. So it's incredibly important, as they're recommending here, and here's the link to this one. All right, very useful to read about. So keep in mind, this website is run by the Ontario Securities Commission, so it's a government website. Okay, it's not a matter of just a random person on the internet's opinion. Okay, these are the regulators. Okay. This is the government telling you these are some of the features of these products. That's why I like to use them as a reference. That way you know I'm not trying to sell you anything. It's literally the government and the slash regulators telling you this is how these things work. Okay, so a group RESP, incredibly important to check the fine print, understand how things work. I've mostly edited one video, which will be a 10-minute video looking at specific examples, which I'm gonna post probably in early August, looking specifically at group RESPs, and I have a full example going on there. So I'm not kind of repeating that in here, but the main take home is that group RESPs have some ridiculous fees. And just so you don't think that it's just one sneaky company that is being dishonest, which again, I'm still perplexed and amazed how some of these plans, how they're allowed to charge the fees that they are, but it's just the way it goes. They have some ridiculous things, okay? So this is why they give you this entire warning here on this subsection for the group RESP. So for group RESPs, some of their main features are this. They will, as you're opening the account, they will tell you, well, how much do you want to contribute to your child? So you kind of pretty much have to determine when you set up the account how much you will be willing to contribute. You can typically increase the amount that you're going to be contributing over time, but you can pretty much never decrease it without penalties, right? Furthermore, there are massive fees, massive commission fees to buy these units, right? Because they're selling you mutual fund units, right? So mutual funds are sold in units, whether you're buying them for your own investment portfolio or for an RESP. So they're sold in units, and there's like some ridiculous fees for these things, okay? So typically, I'm just trying to see here very quickly if they still mention it, because typically about 50% of the fees on the first will go to cover 100% of your contributions on the first X number of dollars, whatever the price of a unit is. Typically, most units will have a $100 per unit fee associated with them. Some will have it slightly higher, some will have it slightly lower, but let's assume you're going with one of these standard ones that basically they literally charge you $100 per unit that you're buying, okay? So usually 100% of your first $50 per unit you're contributing to your child's RESP goes towards paying off the fee. So let's say you're buying 10 units and you're contributing $500 to your child's RESP. 100% of that $500 goes towards paying the $50 per, the 50% of the fee, which is, again, if the fee is $100. Actually, let me just write this down so it's a bit clearer, because I'm worried I'm going to lose some people here. So let's say, again, this is standard. Some have it higher, some have it lower. But your standard fee, okay? So this is fee / commission. Just commission like this, okay? So this is the fee to buy units. Buy units. There you go. My tablet is acting up again. It does that sometimes. So to buy units, it's typically around $100 per unit. Okay, that's a one-time fee. Okay, so let's assume you want to buy, 10 units. Okay, if you want 10 units, that means, right, 10 times 100, that means you're going to have to pay $1,000 in commission fees. Typically, 50%, the first, so let's say if the fee is actually $100, okay, so I'm just gonna put it at $100. If the fee is $100, typically 100%, okay, of the first $50, okay, per unit, goes towards paying the commission. Okay, so you're contributing here, you have 10 units, you're contributing $500, then literally right now 500 went towards paying the fee. You still owe 500 out of the 1,000, right? Because you paid 500 out of the 1,000 you owe in total. And then the remaining 50% or $50 per unit, they'll be basically charging you 50% on subsequent contributions until you pay off the full $100. So let's say here you're contributing $1,000, right? So you're buying 10 units, you're contributing $1,000. That means out of the first $500, 100% of it, so $500 went towards paying the fee. On the next $500, right? 50%, $250 goes towards paying the fee. So right now you've paid $1,000, but the way it is, right now the fee has been $750, right? Because it's $500 plus the $250, and your child's RESP actually only has $250 in it. Okay, that's what happens right now. Then obviously they will also apply to the government to get the various government grants, etc., etc., etc. But look how much money you're just wasting up front, right? And as I said, this is not just one company doing this. It's not every single company that is a group RESP that necessarily has this model, but many of them do, sadly. Okay. So it's important to be aware of this. Okay. So if you're just going back real quick here to this. Here we go. So this is why you get this warning here. If you cancel your plan in the first few years, you'll get back much less you put in. This is because sales charges are deducted from your early contributions, so less of your money is invested. That's what that refers to. Okay, this is why it literally has a whole block warning here. Okay. They used to have, they've updated this, I think, and again, make sure you understand what the different rules and fees are. Okay, a lot of these plans, as you will see in that short video that I'll be releasing in about a month from now, which that video, all it does is just compares basically three scenarios: someone opening up a basic high fee mutual fund, basically a 2% MER mutual fund, RESP, okay? It compares that, what happens to this, and it's a balanced, diversified portfolio, right? Then it compares a group RESP that has a roughly, once you factor in all the fees, roughly a 2.7% fee. Not all of them have a 2.7%. Some have higher fees, some have slightly lower, plus the ridiculous commission, sales commission from the beginning. Okay, that's the craziness with some group RESPs. Others don't have the starting commission, but they'll have a roughly 3.2 or thereabouts ongoing fee. And then it compares an RESP that just is standard, with a robo-advisor such as Simple or any other robo-advisor that basically literally charges you about 0.75% MER, and that's it. Okay, so it just looks at every single one of these situations and how much money you end up with. And as I said, that's a short video that I've already edited most of it. It's just I'll be releasing it about a month from now if you want to, because that way you can just skip right on to the example. So needless to say that you'll end up with a lot more money in the last example here, and way less in this example. And this one is not terrible, but you can do better, basically. Okay. All right. So the take home from all of this: RESPs can be a great way to save/invest for your child's education, right? So I highly recommend, if you're able to and willing to support your child. Again, depends on your parenting style. Some people say, you know what, I've gone to university, or I've gone to this trade school. No one helped me out. I think it was really useful for me to struggle maybe or work hard for my tuition costs. It really was a great lifetime learning opportunity. So I think my children could benefit from that sort of kind of picking yourself up by the bootstraps approach. So if that's your approach, by all means, you don't have to open an RESP. You don't have to help them out. But again, that's one option. So it's your decision. So if you decide to help your children out with their post-secondary education, RESPs are most certainly the best way to do so. Because again, who doesn't love free money from the government? And on top of that, who doesn't love not having to legally not having to pay taxes on those investments for 18 to 36 years? And now let's assume that your child gets a part-time job or a full-time job or whatever, and they're also manage to do they're finishing up their studies, and they have all this ton of extra money, $100,000, $200,000, whatever left in their RESP. Yes, once they turn 36, they have to shut down that RESP. There are certain ways that you can deposit the money from the RESP inside of your child's RRSP in certain cases. Again, I'll discuss this in a future video, or you can just read about it on the various links on the CRA website and the OSC website that I provide you with that information. It's there already, right? So if you don't want to wait until August, you can read about it now. So all three types of RESPs, from individual, family, and group, give you access to the exact same government benefits. That's incredibly important. I know I've said it like 5 times already, but it's incredibly important. If you ever find a RESP salesperson trying to tell you that their magic group RESP is better than everyone else's because they give you access to these grants that everyone else has, that person is full of it. Okay, it's they're outright lying or misdirecting you. Whether they're doing it because they're ignorant and they don't know any better, or they're doing it just so you invest with them because they like their high commission. In either case, you're either dealing with someone who's unqualified or someone who's blatantly lying to your face. Which, I don't know, when you're dealing with someone managing your own money or your child's money, do you really want to deal with either someone that has no clue what they're talking about, or someone who's blatantly lying to your face so they can make more money off of you? So it should be a massive red flag if anyone ever tells you that a group RESP is better than another type of RESP because it gives you access to more. Actually, sorry, I should specify one thing that technically speaking, they would be correct. Which I didn't really want to delve on this because it would have taken a bit longer. But one thing that group RESPs could give you money, could provide you extra benefits of, is that group RESPs, if you contribute to your RESPs, as I said, you have to pre-select how much you want to contribute to your RESP, right? If for whatever reason you lose your job or you're no longer able to make your contributions, right? Some group RESPs have built-in insurance. So part of the reason why their fees are higher is because you also have to pay like $1, $5, whatever it is, per unit or per 10 units every single month. Again, why would you get insurance? Because basically all that insurance does is that in case you're not able to make your payments, it will make your payments for a certain amount of time. Again, read the fine print for how long. Some of them will say, well, we'll make the payments for the next 6 months, next year, next X number of months. So just figure out whether it's worthwhile paying for that sort of insurance, or even bothering to get that plan to begin with, right? So you figure out exactly whether you need or you don't need that insurance. If you don't go with a group RESP, no one forces you to make those contributions. If you cannot no longer make the contributions in a family or individual one, no one's going to say, well, you haven't made the contributions, therefore we're going to charge you a penalty, right? So if you go with a group RESP, which again is the only one that forces you to make those contributions on an ongoing basis, if you miss a contribution and you don't have the insurance, then you can literally be kicked out of the group plan. In some cases, if you're lucky, you will get back a tiny fraction of your money, the same way that if you're early on in the group RESP plan, the same way that the OSC website was warning you. Worst case scenario, you get kicked out of the plan and you don't get anything out of it. So if for whatever reason you want to leave the group plan, in some of the worst cases, again, read the fine print, you might literally lose most of your contributions if you leave early on enough. Now, what happens with those excess contributions? Again, any money that has to be repaid back to the federal and provincial government will be repaid back to them. Any other money that has been contributed into the account that hasn't already been eaten up by the various fees, by the various commissions, by the fact that you have to repay the government, or the provider has to repay the government grants and bonds, the rest of it gets distributed among the group RESP holders, among all the other ones. So that's what I'm saying. Like, the one thing you could reasonably say, well, yes, group RESPs will give you an extra little boost, is that the more people leave the group RESP while your child is still in it, you will get part of their money, basically. But keep in mind, this is a very much a double-edged sword. Number one, you're profiting from other people's misery. I guess you could also argue that all investing is really whenever someone makes money, someone else has to lose money, right? Therefore, how is it any different? There is a bit of a nuance there, I think you'll notice. But anyway, so let's say it isn't different. But you still have to deal with the fact that what if it's you? What if it's you who has to shut down the account and then you're losing your money? Whereas all the other ones, for the family and the individual one, yeah, sure enough, you have to pay back the government grants if you have to shut down the account, right? For the money where the government grants were paid out to you. But you're not losing your initial contributions, right? You're not losing it to massive one-time sales commissions, right? So other than that feature, which is, again, it's a kind of a very much double-edged sword where, yes, you could benefit from the misery of others that are part of the plan, but it can also equally mess you up, basically, if you're the one that is struggling financially. Other than that, group RESPs, individual RESPs, and family RESPs have access to the exact same ones. When it comes to the government, they're absolutely the exact same benefits. So this statement is still correct. It's the exact same government benefits. That's not a government feature. That's just a feature of the plan itself. That, you know, if someone leaves the plan, you will get some of their money, right? That has nothing to do with the government. So government benefits are identical regardless of plan. So my point being, if someone selling group RESPs tells you that it gives you access to additional government funds, that's a lie. That's inaccurate. That's not true. The one thing you could reasonably argue that, yes, you could technically have a bit extra money eventually, is if enough people leave the plan that the people that remain in the plan will get an extra boost. But the downside of that is, on an ongoing basis, the fees are giant. So regardless, the fact that you have these high fees on an ongoing basis, the MER, management expense ratio, is so high, with typically more conservative investments, and on top of the very, very high initial sales charges, you still make way less money at the end of it, even with the benefit of, haha, if people leave, I'm going to get their money type of thing, right? All right, so family RESPs provide the most flexibility typically, and group the least. But as I said, individual RESPs are perfectly fine as well, and you can convert individual RESPs into family RESPs pretty much anytime. Group RESPs you're pretty much stuck with them, right? So as I said, whenever it comes to investing, especially in an unknown, uncertain world, the more flexibility you have, the less you have to pay in fees, the more options you have, the better of an investment it is. So always opt for the investment that offers you the choices that are in line with your risk tolerance, with your time horizon, where you're investing for your own retirement, in your TFSA, RSP, or whether you're investing for your children inside of an RESP. Always go with, again, do your research, find things, find out what type of investments you're okay with. What type of portfolio is right for you. You can check some of my old videos and some new ones that will come up soon check out the OSC website to find out more information about this stuff. And once you find something that is in line with your investments, just find a provider that is registered with the various authorities. Find an advisor that is licensed to give you personalized individual investment advice in the province you're residing in. And then, again, go with the lowest fee for the same service. Sometimes it's worthwhile paying a bit more for a better service, for, also tax planning advice, etc., etc., etc. But if you're not getting any of the other benefits or perks, why would you pay 2 or 3% in fees? It's ridiculous, right? Anyway, aim for an RESP that is in line with your needs and has low fees, as I said before. And that pretty much, kind of wraps up for today's session. I hope this was useful to all of you. And again, the 2 or 3 links at the very end that I forgot to include initially, I'll make sure to include them in the description of the video once this is posted. So thanks again, everyone, for attending today's session. I hope you found it useful. If you have any questions, again, just drop them down in the comment section below, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Now, next week, yeah, I'll have my usual Thursday Thursday session live stream. I'm just trying to check really quickly what is the next week is. I'll be talking about how reverse mortgages destroys your savings. Actually, that's going to be also an interesting one. Like my two big pet peeves, I guess, in the Canadian investment environment are probably Group RESPs and reverse mortgages, because a lot of people that are unaware how much reverse mortgage can destroy your equity that you've spent decades building your home, and how quickly it can destroy it. Yeah, so the next Thursday should be quite interesting if you're interested in that sort of stuff. So yeah, so I hope this was useful. Happy belated Canada Day for all of you that celebrated yesterday. And that pretty much wraps it up for me for today. So have a good one, everyone. And enjoy the summer heat we're currently having. So all the best, and see you next time. Take care.